It's time to take a break from your day and let us build it in a positive way. This is Break and Build with Brad and Billy.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back.
What's going on?
Today, we're going on a journey down a rabbit hole of me and TV broadcasting and production, specifically in the esports realm, but it does tie into TV a lot. There are some experiences that actually correlate to helping produce actual esports onto TV stations. So there's a lot. So I guess we step it back, right, Billy? It started with us.
It did. So we want to take you guys through this journey that Brad's had. So we're going to reverse the roles. We've been through all of everything that I've been through with YouTube, and we haven't delved too far into Brad's personal agendas and how he's gotten to where he is, and what he's doing and everything like that. So everything that Brad does, like I always tell you guys, is super impressive. We talked about in the last episode. If you guys didn't see that, you should definitely go back, because Brad dropped a little Easter egg for how a mind may think to be successful, which was super powerful. So we're going to get into it. And we started all the way back when me and Brad connected, when we started playing Halo. And yeah, man. So like, just run us through the early parts of your career, because we've briefly touched on it, right? So we talked about you being an entrepreneur, being the car detailer, and then on to Walgreens, and then on from there. So just give us a little background on that, and let's just start.
Yeah, I mean, I did a bunch of management jobs and everything like that, and Halo was a big part of my life, and traveling, playing competitively. And then when we decided, hey, let's host events, I just kind of took on the whole figuring out how to stream, because you had to have a stream. If you're going to have an event, you had to have a stream, even though esports was still new. And I didn't know anything about it. So it was like, it's literally like sitting on Google and just searching, like, okay, how do you do this stuff? And I remember the hardest thing about the Halo events was that everything was played on Xboxes. So now how it's different is every person has their own Xbox and their own console. Nowadays, there's a spectator client, and a lot of it's PC driven. So you really only have to worry about capturing a single PC, and then everything's built into the game to be able to view this esport that's going on and the video game that's going on. But back then, we had to hook up every Xbox individually, and we had to manually press a button to switch between each person that you wanted to watch. So now it's all
I vividly remember that.
Yeah. So now it's all software driven for the most part. There is still ways you could hook up hardware and stuff like that, but like most of the stuff they build into the games now. So it's super easy. You're using a keyboard to, like, hit, I want to go to player 1 or I want to go to player 8, whatever it is.
Wow.
Super easy. Even when we did like up to, 100-person game, we're using the numpad and we're just typing in whatever player number we wanted to go to. So imagine, Billy, hooking up 100 individual feeds and then trying to like watch that. Like it's just chaos. It's so much to do.
I mean, I've seen 8 feeds get hooked up, and it's chaos.
Yeah. and so like we started off with a literally like an $80 HDMI input, like hardware switcher that you would use this for hooking up like a DVD player, multiple video game systems to a TV, and you would literally click a button on it, 1, 2, 3, for like what source you want to watch on your TV, right? That is what we used for our first event.
And how did you get to that conclusion that that's the one you should start with?
Because I all I knew is it had to be hooked up HDMI, because everything came from the Xbox. So I was like, okay, I'll put an HDMI splitter on the Xbox. It'll go to the monitor and it'll go to something that we can press a button. I didn't know anything about SDI. I didn't know anything about these big hardware switchers. And we were just trying not to spend a lot of money. Like we had like a small sponsor who was like, oh, I'll give you guys like, $800 or something to have the event happen. So we're like, all right, what can we get with this small amount of money? So it was basically the cheaper we can go, the better. And we still had to get all the cables and everything like that. So this is something where like everything comes in super similar to like your Pokemon Go experience with your like first Go Fest, where like you get the equipment the day before with no testing. So it's like you
Yeah.
get the equipment and we're like, okay, we just plug it in at the event. We literally didn't get it until like the night before. So I've never done a stream. I've never done a broadcast. I've never done anything. I don't know what any of this equipment is. So I get it all hooked up. I'm like, all right, this is awesome. It's going to work. Well, not only that, but we didn't test if it worked until the first match was playing. So there
was it, but here's the thing, was it being hooked up, like it was being hooked up all the way until the first match was ready?
Yeah.
Or it was like ready and you couldn't, and you just chose not to?
No, it was like it's being hooked up. Like I'm pretty sure they started playing while we were still hooking it up even.
Yeah, that's what I thought I remember.
like we didn't even start streaming right away. And so then we're like, all right, it's hooked up. The first thing we do, right, is we press a button to switch a point of view, and it makes their screen go black. So like as you're playing, your screen goes black for like 2 seconds.
Oh my
and
God.
That's because,
which is an absolute no-go in Halo. Like when you're running for the most clutch thing ever, and you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's on fire. Switch to his screen goes black. Like not gonna be able to work.
and so it's like the reason it goes black, right, is because think about it. You're switching from one source to another on this thing that's made to just watch TV, right? So like if you click over to your DVD player from your Xbox, even if you switch a TV channel, right, it flickers black for a little bit. So like that's just how it worked then. Like there wasn't anything else that was like this instant gratification thing. And so we're like, okay, all we can do then is we left it all hooked up, and then we said, okay, we can just pick one person's point of view to watch per match. So then that's all we did. We sat on a single person per game. We switched it per game who we were watching, and we just left it at that. That was our first stream. There's nothing else to it. So that was kind of the first stream experience. It went very well though. Like everything went fine after that, but not knowing the equipment was just like, oh man. So then we go into the second event and we're like, all right, now let's add like player cameras to it, right? We're using the same like type of switcher. We're like, okay, we're just gonna have one point of view per team now instead of one player. So now we have 2 point of views. We know we can't switch it because we don't have money to go and buy thousands of dollars of stuff yet. And then we're like, okay, webcams. Yeah, USB webcams will create player cams. We'll just hook up 8 USB webcams into this computer, and we'll have all these players' point of views. We buy like these like $8 USB webcams, like the crappiest USB webcams you could possibly imagine. And then I hook them all up into this USB splitter. So you've got 8 USB devices going into a computer. Well, if you don't know this, computers can only handle so many USBs going in because it can only handle so much power going into it. So if you ever try to hook up a bunch of USB stuff on top of like your mouse and your keyboard and stuff like that, your computer's probably going to give you the middle finger, and it's going to be like, I'm not working. And that's just what happens. So even to this day, I've seen a lot of people that do like lower production stuff. They'll be like, oh, I'm just going to run everything off webcams. I had one last year that I did consulting for, and I was like, you can't do that. I've been through this. It's going to not work at some point. And there's multiple things that can happen. Either the computer just won't work, or the webcams will become super like laggy and desynced because it can't process like all the video stuff coming in. So it'll become like super laggy, desynced. You could run it for 10 hours and it would be perfectly fine. Well, at any given point within that broadcast, just assume that everything's going to not work for you. And you're going to have to restart it all, turn it all off, let your computer breathe. So I was like, you can't do that. They're like, oh, well, we tested it. I was like, well, how did you test it? Oh, I plugged everything into it. It worked. I was like, how long did you run it for? Oh, like 5 minutes. Well, that's not long enough. You're about to do a 45-hour broadcast. 5 minutes is not going to be what's happening in hour 15. So like, it's not meant to do that. Computers are not meant to take that much stuff in. So once again, we plug it all in at the event. It doesn't work. So like they just don't show up.
Doesn't even work for a minute?
No, it doesn't even, like the stuff doesn't even show up. And it's because the computer physically like can't comprehend what's happening. It's like, I don't know what you're putting in me and how much stuff you're putting in me.
It probably has a lot to do with also the fact that like webcams get powered off that USB.
Yes, it does. So like if you're running components in your computer that already has too much power, there's nothing you could do about it. So yeah, I think that they weren't getting power. and whether it
Mm-hmm.
was to do with the splitter, too many inputs, whatever. And so I'm like, okay, well, I don't have enough cables because like I put them all into this splitter on the desk, and then I had one cable that went to the computer. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't have long enough cables to run to the computer for all of them individually, so we're just gonna hook up one camera and we're gonna have one point of view again for this event because that's all we can do.
So we have two events that go down, right? And like when we're listening to this and they're listening to this, like there's pretty easy outs here, right? Like there's a pretty easy like I suck at this. There's a pretty easy like this is hard. Like we've already had two events that suboptimally performed as far as like what my mind perceives could happen and what my and then like what actuality is. So how did you manage those gaps in like I think this can happen and this is what's actually happening and then like not get so frustrated that you're like I'm not doing this.
I think that the frustration goes out the window when everybody that's attending the event is having such a good time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the amount of people that we had at those events and the caliber of players that we had at those events and just everybody, the fun that everybody was having is what pushes you to do it again.
Mm.
Despite all of the issues that you might have technology wise, it's like, oh, hey, we had less than last time. So it's an improvement, right? We
Mm.
had better this. Like, it's an improvement. So as long
Mm-hmm.
as like when you're doing one thing, you're going from one event to another and you say, here's the one thing we improved on. Here's the 10 things that went better than last time. Like you learn from your mistakes. Don't let those mistakes happen again, right? We didn't let the same mistakes happen. We let new mistakes happen. But you just improve on the quality, improve on the performance, you improve on the flow, you improve on everything. So that's all you can do
Mm-hmm.
is you improve. Let the past be the past. So then at this point, we have investors actually attend this event, and now we start to get money to get
And this
real gear.
is College of DuPage?
Yep, yep. College
Cool.
DuPage in Chicago is where this
So
event was.
guys, the one baby wins, like just focus on baby wins all the time. As you heard Brad say, like even for me, stuff sucks. Like it sucks at first. If you can just look at the small little incremental wins along the way, like don't think you're going to be ESPN when you literally have never touched a computer.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the biggest mental gap that creates people anxiety to I hear people all the time like I'm starting a YouTube channel and then I'll go and look at their YouTube channel like 2 months later and they'll put out one video.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee it's because they'll like watch and I don't even think my videos are that great. My videos or they'll watch, another person's videos and they're like, wow, they're really good. And then you actually get and do it and you're like, okay, well, this was really hard, or my audio didn't work, or my camera looks like crap, or whatever it is. And then you look at the other video and you're like, well, I can't do that.
Right.
And instead of Brad going to ESPN and watching, like, my stream didn't look like that, he said, I started here and I just took one step forward and I already made some improvements. Like, use that in your life. Just look at yourself and compare yourself to you instead of comparing yourself to somebody that's a professional.
So the investors attend that event. We end up getting money now to get like professional equipment. And I did all this research. A lot of people out there, if you are in the broadcast world, you know what like a TriCaster is. A TriCaster is like the most commonly used switcher that you can plug everything into. They're really expensive though. Like I'm talking like you gotta go like $30,000 to $100,000 in the
Wow.
hole to get one of those. So there's this company Black Magic, and for
Mm-hmm.
anybody that is doing any type of like production, even camera stuff, like for video work, Black Magic is like absolutely my favorite company out there, and they will be until the end of time because they are affordable and their quality of what they do is so good. Like they understand that the people that are going to use their products are amateurs, semi-professionals, but then they do have a step for those professionals. Like they have these tiered things of price points. Like if you're just a streamer, they've got this $300 switcher now that you can go and buy, hook up your actual camera to, hook up your Xbox to it, and you can have a hardware switcher. It's $300. Well, 15 years ago, you had to spend $50,000 or you were getting nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they have these things from $300 all the way up to $20,000 of whatever you want to get. So they're absolutely amazing. Even their camera gear, it's the exact same thing where it's like you want a cheap camera gear to go around in your pocket, or do you want this crazy expensive movie or TV quality camera that you want to spend $100,000 on. Like, they have the range for whatever you need, and their products are so good, and they're amazing. So I find them because I was like, okay, our budget is like, we've got this up to $50,000 investment, but we don't want to go spend it all. So we want to do stuff very, very cheap. We buy some cameras that are not the best cameras. We bought Canon cameras for broadcast. So like they ended up being good for like photos and stuff like that we were doing, but they're not good for on live presence. And that's because when you're doing cameras for on live presence, you need to make sure they're going to stay recording. So a lot of these cameras that are meant for photos, when you record them, they're only meant to record for like a minute, 2 minutes, like in a row, and then they turn off on you. So that's something to look at whenever you're looking at cameras. If you're wanting something that does photos and does video, it's really hard to come across. The best ones that probably do both are like the small shot cameras that you'll use to vlog, or like Billy uses for like YouTube stuff, because they do really good photos, but they do really good videos. But they're not going to give you all of like I could change my lens out, and they're not meant for like these high quality, super professional photos. So we get these Canon cameras and we're like, oh, we can get lenses, we could do whatever. Well, they don't stay on. They stay on for like a 10-minute duration, and we have to hit them on and off every time we're going to go live. So it's like, it's not ideal. It works, but we have to make sure that the casters are only on camera for a very small period of time, because that's really the only thing that we were showing on camera at that point. But it's just an annoying factor of like, oh, I got to get up, I got to turn this on, I got to make sure it's focused, I got to do all these steps before I can go to this camera. You never want to really put yourself in that situation. You want to get a camera that is meant for broadcast and that is going to stay recording. Blackmagic has amazing cameras for that, and they do decent photos. Like, they don't do amazing photos, but like if you need photos, like they'll do like photos for you. But it's two separate things. If you want photos, to get photos for an event or photos for something, you need to go buy a Canon camera with an L-glass lens, and you got to put all this money into a photo rig. If you want something that is video, you need to put your money into a video rig. They are two completely different things. They don't cross paths. If they cross paths, you're going to get mediocre of both. So like, you just have to decide on what you want. Mediocre of both is perfectly fine for a lot of situations. But if you're doing like a live broadcast, you just got to weigh those pros and cons.
I think as a consumer on that point, it's like we think that we spend more money, which equals better of everything, and it can do more, right? But in reality, when you spend more money, you get more laser focused on what that specific thing is really good at. Like you just emphasized, of like, a really good Canon camera for photos is going to suck at videos. Or a really good video camera, more video first, camera second, is going to not so good photos, which is, you got to pick. Like I used that same Canon camera and try to do vlogs with it, and it was awful. Like I see people out there starting vlogs and they have a Canon Rebel trying to hold it up, and it's like, the camera autofocus is so incredibly slow that if you used it, you'd be blurry the entire time of it trying to focus on you.
It's because those lenses are made to stay at a single focal length. Like, it's meant to stay like, hey, you sit here, I'm taking a photo, right? You're focusing it all, you're taking a photo. It's not meant to do this forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, backward thing. Right. It can't keep up. So
it's important to know your products. Like, what is their primary focus? Brad is harping on this and doing an amazing job at it.
So like, whenever you're getting something, like, you really want to look, like, seriously, go watch all the videos out there, watch a bunch of reviews, find out exactly what that product does, find out what its pros and cons are, compare it to the other 10 products you might buy, and just slowly narrow it down. I do this to this day for everything. Like, I just bought a new gimbal, and I needed it for a very certain camera. So I went and looked at all the gimbals that were good for that camera. And then I said, okay, these 3 are pretty good. Then I went and I watched like 10 different YouTuber reviews on all of those. And then I narrowed it down to 2. And then one of the 2 just had like 10 points that were better than the other one. And I was like, it's a no-brainer. This is the one I buy. And like, the price point was double for the other one. So like, I got the cheaper one because it ended up being better for my camera, for my rig, for what I needed to do. And so like, I could have gone and bought this better one that was like made out of better metal. It can fold up and it's better for traveling maybe, and like all these other things. And I'm like, it's meant for bigger cameras. It's going to be heavier. It's not meant for like my camera. This other one is like specifically meant for the camera that I have. So I went with that one. And it was like, it's half the price. So sweet. So like money, the amount of money you spend is not always the answer. Like certain companies just think they're worth more, so the product's more expensive. It's as simple as that. So yeah, we get through that. I get this Blackmagic switcher. I move over everything to SDI. So now we're converting the Xboxes from HDMI to SDI. SDI is standard. I don't even know what it stands for, honestly. I forget. So there's SDI and there's HD SDI. There's all these different forms. Like some are standard definition, some are high definition, some are 4, and then it goes into like fiber. So it's basically HDMI. Certain cables can only go certain lengths. Like an HDMI cable, once you get to like that like 50-foot range, it's just going to lose signal on you. It physically can't transfer the data far enough. So SDIs, they can go up to 250 feet before that starts to happen. And then you can add like a device on it called a repeater, which will allow you to extend it even more, like another 250 feet. So you can do that. But now you start to have all these points of failure. So a big thing in the production is you want to minimize your points of failure. So like if you come out of an Xbox with an HDMI cable, you go into a converter, then you got to go SDI to the switcher. You have, 4 points of failure. You got the Xbox, you got the HDMI cable, the converter, the SDI cable, and the switcher. So you got 5 points of failure right there. Every single step you add in between there is going to be another point of failure that you have to check if something goes wrong. So whenever you're hooking anything up, always look at how many points of failure you possibly have and minimize it. I can't even tell you how many times I've had people just go hook up cable after cable after cable. So it's like, okay, hey, we have to get this 20-foot cable, right? Instead of going and getting a 20 or 25-foot cable, I've seen people take a 3-foot cable, a 5-foot cable, and a 10-foot cable and connect them all together. And I'm like, okay, now you just added in 5 more points of failure because you have a 3-foot cable, 5-foot cable, a 10-foot cable. Then you've got the connector between both of them. So now you have 5 extra points of failure that you don't need to have. So now if anything goes wrong with that feed, you got to go check now 8 points of failure, 9 points of failure instead of 5. So like you're making it when something does happen. And when I preface it that when something goes wrong, not if, it's when. In the broadcast world, it is when something goes wrong, how fast you can react and fix it. Because it does not matter how much you test stuff. It does not matter how many rehearsals you do. It does not matter if everything is working perfectly fine for 3 days straight. The second you go live, something is going wrong. Like a camera's breaking, a cable's breaking, a light is going out. It does not matter what it is. Something is going wrong and is going to consistently keep going wrong during that entire broadcast. And all it is how fast you can react, what plans you have in place to fix it, and how fast you can fix it. So points of failure, super important. And I think that just kind of
even at high levels, this happens.
100%.
Okay.
It's so when stuff goes wrong, it's how do you make it not noticeable to the consumer? So like if you go watch like a live TV show or a sporting event, you're not going to know of any of these issues because they're so in tune to how to fix it, and they have so many backups in place that it doesn't matter, right?
Like camera 1's not feeding in, we're only shooting through camera 2 angle.
Exactly. It doesn't matter until they fix it, right? There's so many things. Like how many times have you watched the end of the Super Bowl and you've got the camera on the field and it starts to cut in and out, right? Because they're not getting a good signal because there's so many other signals in that area now that are blocking it because it's a wireless signal most of the time. So all cell phones get in the way of that. All those news crews get in the way of that. So you got all these radio frequencies sending camera signals. So now when that starts to get all choppy and stuff like that, they got to just say that camera's done, cut to another one. Right? So sometimes when they're like that, you might all of a sudden get a far away camera because all the cameras on the field probably stopped working. and they have to like
That's a good
readjust
point.
and wait for that to happen. So like there's kind
Or
of a
sometimes, like,
situation.
if they don't have another thing, they'll literally say, like, okay, we're sorry for the camera.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you'll know when they don't have it.
Yep, yeah. You just and there's no reason to not just say it because it's like it's electronics, it's equipment, stuff breaks. So
Yeah.
trying to beat around the bush is sometimes worse than just being like, well, this just happened, we're figuring it out, and you're just watching the two announcers, right, while they figure it out because there's nothing else you can do. Everything else is broken.
Right.
And that
That's
happens
crazy.
even less at high level because they have so many more cameras, right? Like they've got
Right.
100 cameras in that stadium versus a smaller production where you might only have one camera or two cameras.
Uh-huh.
Well, if it breaks, you now have to go to just a solid weight screen and be like, sorry for the technical difficulties. But how fast can you fix that to be up and running? Well, the less
Right.
points of failure, the better for you.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that it's just doing the research, figuring out what your points of failure are. We get into this whole SDI new equipment realm, and we go onto these new events now using this equipment. We we're such a stickler for whatever reason. We're just like we have to have player cams since day one, and that's probably
That's because, like,
dumbest.
MLG had player cams,
I know.
man. It was just the nostalgia of,
it's
like,
what you had to have, and we should have just done
it's
without it. It shouldn't have been a big deal. It added so
yeah.
much complications. So we
But it's
update.
so cool, though.
I know. We upgrade that. We get some lights. We get a backdrop. We get these Canon cameras. We're like, all right, cool. Player cams. We need to get player cams. I'm like, all right, how do I do this without spending, $1,000 per camera?
So, like, what would be the ideal player cam scenario if
So,
you were to have
yeah.
unlimited budget?
So the ideal one is honestly it's the Blackmagic micro cameras, and you can buy lenses for like $150 for them. The cameras are $1,300 each though, so you're spending $1,300 on a camera. So basically, you're spending $1,500 per setup. They go up to 4K. They're amazing cameras. They're really small. You can put them on mounts right in front of people and stuff like that. So that's the ideal situation. They're all SDI fed. It's a lot of stuff. That's the ideal situation. That's what pretty much is the industry standard now. So those did not exist though until maybe 2.5 years ago. So before that, there was Marshall cameras, and they made these small pocket cameras. They went up to 1080p. They're about $500 each. No lenses that you can change on them. They're these really small, like they're about webcam sized cameras, really small. They shot in color and black and white. You needed really good light for them or they turn out really grainy. Every time the power goes off, you have to reset all their settings manually. Lots of flaws to them. Like this is like bootleg, like small camera stuff. So it's like every morning you have to go into every camera manually, reset everything, go through these million settings. It's the biggest pain in the butt ever.
Oh man.
Yeah, we used those, and then we upgraded to Blackmagic for all the other esports stuff that I do. So before that, I went down and I said security cameras. I said security cameras have this hardware thing that switches between them, and it's like $500 for like 12 cameras. Yeah, security cameras. So we get security
I remember
cameras.
you coming to me with that. You're like, I got the answer.
Yeah.
I don't hear the back workings, but I hear, dude, I got the answer. Like, awesome.
So I made a rig out of PVC pipe, and I zip tied security cameras to it. That was the rig for this.
Dude, the innovation behind this, guys. You guys just like take this in. Take it in. For real.
So we've got this PVC rig that goes across, 8 computer monitors, and there's a camera zip tied above each one. And the reason we did that is it was easy to transport, easy to move and stuff. I didn't want to make this big bulky thing out of wood. And so we hook it all up. I'm like, okay, this looks good. The color wasn't the best. It was lower quality. Even though stuff says it's 1080p, here's the next lesson. That doesn't mean it's 1080p. There's a million versions of 1080p. So it's like, think of cell phone cameras, right? When cell phone cameras first came out and you look at them and you're like, okay, cool. It's a cell phone. It has a camera. It's like a 3 megapixel camera, right? Now you look at cameras and they're like 50 megapixels. So look at where it's gone from to where it is now. If you took one of those flip phone cameras and you took a photo with it, it'd probably look like pixel art that you drew out of boxes because it's not going to be clear. It's the exact same thing with like these cameras when you buy them. Security cameras are not meant for broadcast. Security cameras are meant to go up in the corner of somewhere, get this wide angle shot,
Uh-huh.
and do these like frame by frame things just to see a general what is going on, right?
Yeah.
How many TV shows have you watched where they're like, oh, we got security camera footage, and they try to zoom in and it's just like a blur of somebody or something,
Yeah.
right? They're not
Right.
meant for high quality. They're meant for just
Mm.
standard, here's what I can see to protect what's going on.
Mm.
So we hook it up. It's super not super clear, kind of pixely. The color isn't the best. So what we do to make the quality better is you put it in black and white.
Mm.
Because when you don't have to do all the color and stuff like that, and you don't have to light the people, black and white seems to be better. So we did black and white night vision mode, and that gave us the best quality cameras for these players. And I'm just like, oh, this actually looks kind of cool because like the video game's in color, you don't want it to take away too much from the video game. So yeah, they're in black and white. Cool. That's awesome. So we run it in black and white. So we got black and white player cams with these security cameras. And we basically just left it like that for the rest of the events, and we didn't mess with it at all. But this is how you have to switch them. You ready? It's not going into the switcher or anything like that. So now you've got the security camera thing, and you've got a remote control with the number cameras on it. So you've got a TV remote control to switch them. And at this point, I had to have somebody helping me. So I had my buddy Nick that we met that lived in the Tennessee area when we were doing all these Tennessee events. He's sitting next to me with a remote control, and I'm on the hardware switcher, and I'm like, get ready to go to 3, and then he would click 3 on the remote, I would click 3 on the thing. And so like it's super standard for when you have to have two of these things like this switching, you'd have two people pressing the buttons. So like you're coordinating, okay, ready to go to this player, 3, 2, 1, boom, 3, 2, 1, boom, 3, 2, 1, boom, and you're both pressing it at the same time. Even to this day, you'll notice a lot of esports stuff still uses this because you'll see it switch to somebody in game and then the player cam will switch afterwards. And that's because they're not counting, they're letting the person that is viewing in game switch to whoever they want to switch to, and then they have another person that's just watching and then going, okay, I'm hitting the camera it's going to after it switches in game. So it still happens a lot with a lot of esports and a lot of things like that. There's not very many other things out there where you have to switch like two cameras at once like this. It's really specific to esports because you want to see their face and see what they're doing in game at the same time. And a lot of people don't do player cams for that reason because it's a huge budget. It is a lot more coordination. There's a lot of things that go into it and that can go wrong. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much where we were at. That's the equipment that we had. We ran 5 or 6 more events with that equipment, and we didn't really improve anything after that. So then that kind of leads us into the more professional, I'm going to say professional with big quotations here, professional broadcast route. I did consultation for a company, which I still work at, which is Hire Studios. And you know, we kind of went over the story. They told me not to bring any equipment. I'll just kind of powerhouse through this part. I brought my equipment though, and basically the company that was supposed to do the broadcasting had never done a broadcast before. So they didn't know that you needed a computer. They didn't know any of this stuff. They're used to just broadcasting to screens in a venue. So like I have to hook up all my equipment, help them through this event. Sweet. It ended up working really good. I ended up getting a job off of it. So now starting at a company that has a bigger budget, right? So now you go from I've never had a budget to how do I start to do this, but still on a low budget because esports is not a proven thing yet, especially for a new company going into a new esports realm with a game that is becoming successful for them in a new game. They don't want to just say, hey, let's hire 50 people. Hey, let's buy all this stuff. They don't want to do that because it's a huge risk. So it's like, okay, how do you take the equipment that you have currently and how do you expand on it? Okay, we can, you know, go and spend a couple $1,000s improving this way. So we improve a little bit on it. We're just doing these online broadcasts and then we're going into an event. So we have to just upgrade equipment. We upgrade to the Marshall cameras for player cams. So now this is where these Marshall cameras come into play. So like
this is the Black Magic ones?
No. This is not Black Magic. It's a company called Marshall. These are like the $500 cameras.
Okay.
It's really all that was out at that point. It's kind of all you could find and use for small form cameras. So we get those cameras. We get some more equipment. We get a graphics software and things like that. And now talking about graphics software. So when we were doing graphics for all of our stuff, we would just use Photoshop, and we would save Photoshop images, and then it would save them to the switcher or to OBS. And like that's just kind of how you did it without having graphics software. You'd have Photoshop open, you'd be updating names, you'd hit save, and it would update it automatically. It's not a good workflow. It's just really.
I'm still under the presumption that that's how it's done.
No, so it's just really slow. So when you look at the graphic side of things, you can start with that, and you can just save images. There's nothing wrong with it. It's super low cost. You can do it. Then you start looking at softwares, and the reason people do that is like the jump for graphics goes from, oh, I can spend $20 a month and do this in Photoshop and just let it be a little slower and make my workflow work around it. Or I could go spend $150,000. Like there's no in between here. Like there's no in between. There's literally nothing. So like you go from that to Ross Expressions or VizRT, and those are pretty much the two that are used in the industry across the board is Ross Expressions.
But for the entire time that you had an extremely, I would say, successful up to what max recurring consistent viewers, 25,000 for all of our arena gamings, you did the Photoshop versions.
Correct.
Because we did not have $150,000 to spend on a company. So guys, you can get to a really high level on a low budget, man.
Yeah.
Like let your environment demand that you need. Like Brad's now in a place that like demands that he needs this.
Right. Because it's $1 million company, you have to have better quality, right? So you have to do better work. So I'm like, okay, we need a new graphics system. We can't be doing this. This is like the first thing that I need to figure out. And I'm doing all this research, trying to find these smaller graphics companies. There's a couple out there. I find this one that's based out of Turkey. It's called CharacterWorks. To this day, so this was in 2014, to this day, it is the program we still currently use.
Wow.
Yes. When we discovered it, they were a brand new company with very little features, very little functionality. But it allowed us to build graphics in a way where we didn't have to use Photoshop and we could do it more live. And how that works is you have basically a software on a computer, and you have two SDI cables that come out of it. One's called a key and one's called a fill. And what that means is a key is a black and white image, right? So imagine taking any image in existence, turning it into like a film negative, right? So it's a black and white like film negative. Then you have the fill, which is all of your color, and it goes on top of it. And what that is everything that is black is going to be see-through. So in that black and white image, anything that's black is not going to appear on your screen, and you're going to see the camera shot behind it. Anything that's white then allows you to put color on top of it. Very similar to like screen printing, right? It's like, here's where the screen is, here's where the ink goes on, here's where the color goes on. Wherever that screen is not cut out, you see the camera behind it. So that allows you to have these transparent lower thirds and transitions and things like that that are on screen that you see. So you've got this key and this fill that come out. We spend like under $1,000 for this software. All right. We're like their like first customer outside of Turkey. They did stuff with like a soccer team inside Turkey. We're like their first company outside of Turkey. So we get this really, really good working relationship with them. And we start like telling them like, hey, what about all these other features? We need features for this, this, and this, and this. So we just start like going down this entire feature list with them. We give them all of this stuff that like you need in the industry to be able to like advance. And so now they start making these features for us. So now we have this company that we spend like $1,000 on a product that's literally developing it for our needs. Wow. In the hopes that it will help them expand to more companies in the future. So we're like, this is like the biggest win we could have ever asked for where we were and in the industry at this time. It was like,
that's amazing.
It was absolutely insane. And so we just stay on this thing with character works all the way to now. And we looked at jumping and going to those more expensive ones like Expressions and VizRT, but every time we went to do it, we're like, it's going to change our workflow. It's going to be a huge investment. It's going to require more people. We don't have the skill set to develop stuff in it. So we always ran into these big roadblocks whenever trying to do that. And instead, we have the best people at our company that know character works. Like, we've been asked to go and do, consulting for other companies to show them how to use CharacterWorks, develop projects for other companies for CharacterWorks, because we were like the founding fathers of this software and help them develop it like for esports needs. And that's something that like a lot of people don't know out there. And like Ray, who I work with, like he's like, I swear to God, he is the best CharacterWorks operator in the world. Like, he was the first person to start working on it in the esports industry. He helped develop all this stuff, and like now he's running the show now, over at High Res. But like, what the work that we did between him and me, but him being the operator and developing the stuff for that, it blows my mind. And so throughout the 6 years of working with CharacterWorks, it was this nonstop working relationship of developing this product, coming up with new features, and we would get the betas of these features, just like if a video game goes into beta, like 6 months, sometimes a year before they would be available to anybody else. They're like, oh, we got sound. Okay, we want that now because we need it for our event in a week. Well, we don't know if it's going to work. We don't care. Give it to us. So like, we would get these features and we would ask them to put features in these special releases for us to be able to debut them at events so then they can see how they work. And it's just, it's absolutely insane. And so like, we had this just nonstop relationship with them all the way up until now. And like, so even now, if you're going to do something, CharacterWorks is where you want to start. CharacterWorks is your stepping stone to go from Photoshop to CharacterWorks. It's more expensive now, but it's like, you can get a decent rig for like under $2,000. You can get, a full blown thing for like $5,000. So, but the cool thing about them is they got all these features in there that you can just pay to unlock. So you can get this basic stuff, and then you can pay $200 when you need sound, and you can unlock the audio. You can pay $500 and unlock another output if you need another output. So like, it's super expandable. And I would say it's pretty similar to using like Photoshop and stuff, or like editing a video. So if you're familiar with that stuff, it's kind of hand in hand. Cool. And yeah, then if you want to go up to VizRT and Expressions, that's where you go from there. Like, if you're doing some crazy stuff, that's what you're going to need. It's going to be way better off for you.
So that's probably what like ESPN and them use?
Yeah. Like pretty much everybody uses one of those two. Most of them are going to, on the TV side, are going to be using VizRT. I'm pretty sure that the NFL uses Expressions though, because the people that we talk to in Expressions here, they actually go and they help them during like the Super Bowls and stuff like that. So yeah, it's really just what you're comfortable with, what your operator does, what your exact needs are. But yeah, those are the two that you typically use. So that's kind of what kicked us off into the first going the next step professional. The last thing that I'll kind of wrap this episode up with is the amount of people on broadcasts. So I was doing all these broadcasts by myself or with one other person, and going into doing stuff for esports, it was under the same vein where it was like me and then +1 or +2 people only. Typically for broadcasts, you've got teams of 50 to 100 people putting a show on. So we're doing these broadcasts that usually require that many people with 3 people. Wow. So that's another just thing, is like, you can accomplish so much by yourself or with a small amount of people if you develop the systems behind it to support it and you try to automate stuff. So it's like, if you're going to start a project, it's really hard to do it by yourself. It's going to require more work and stuff like that. Well, when you hit a point of like, I physically can't do it, just find one person that can help you. And you're going to accomplish 10 times. You might think, oh, I'm going to double it. No, you're going to like quadruple 10 times the amount of stuff, because everything becomes easier. Don't get stuck in a mindset of, I need to do this, it's going to require everything. It doesn't require all the equipment. It doesn't require all the people. It doesn't require, millions of dollars to make it happen. You can make stuff happen if you figure it out. It's just going to take more time and more engineering work and more brain power. That's all it's going to take. But at the end of the day, you're going to, be able to come out on top and feel just more, I guess, accomplished, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't.
And you're going to be more knowledgeable.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll get a little bit more into like where the people come into play as we expand into bigger events and stuff like that, like where you kind of have to have more people and we have to sit them. But I'll tell you this, there's one event that I've been a part of that was a full-fledged, the amount of staff you should have for a broadcast. And that was with Overwatch League when it was going to ESPN and ABC and Disney Channel all at once. So that's the only event I've been a part of where I've been able to actually see how many people that they have to put on an event. All the events I'm used to doing, like $1 million events, like millions of dollars into a single event. I'm talking we run that anywhere from 10 staff up to maybe 20 max. And those events should be triple that usually. So you can accomplish a lot with a small team. But yeah, I mean, that's what I got for right now. We'll kind of continue this journey into the next one and kind of talk about how it expands into those $1 million events, how the equipment takes a step up, and then my experiences working with other companies. So if you want to know like what it's like working with like companies like Supercell, companies like Overwatch, and things like that, I have experience with all of that, done broadcasts for them all and things like that. So kind of can go into the nuances and the ins and the outs of kind of what you experience different working for different companies, which I think is really good just in general when you're working with different customers, when you're working with different, clients and anything like that. That goes across almost any job or any career you're going to have. And how different it is. It's wild, like how different things are, and you have to be able to adapt to that. So yeah, that's how I got started into it, and I'll leave you guys there, and we'll do the other half of the journey in the next episode.
Yeah, super insightful, as always. Lots of little things that you guys can take away from what Brad talks about, how you expand on things, how you think about things, how you analyze, like how can I be the most productive here if I can understand more. I think the biggest thing we're going to take away from this is like knowledge is power. It's not always money, because you could have a lot of money and spend it on something and not know about it and just completely waste your money.
Yep.
So I think that's the biggest thing that you guys could absolutely take away from this is literally the more you know about the small things that are going to then demand you to get bigger things, the better you're going to be about being able to talk to people about it, to be able to know not to get ripped off about getting a specific product because you're like, no, I don't need that. This is what I need because I already know all the bottom feed. Like I've looked through all the bottom feed before I take one step out. And that is just like the most powerful thing you guys could do. Knowledge is always power. And the more you know, the better you're served in any facet of life.
Agree. Wholeheartedly agree.
Yep. All right, guys. We appreciate you being here. As always, excited to hear about this next journey. This is some stuff that I probably haven't heard too much about either. So I'm equally as excited to hear about these next level broadcasts, because when you see this in operation, and like for me, seeing it from event standpoint and like watching all, these cords and equipment and, stuff that like is completely over my head it's just so cool. But like then seeing like rigs hooked up and all the cameras and like, full-fledged like ESPN bottom thirds and stuff like that Brad talks about, which is like the bars that go across in motion, correct?
Yep.
Are just like, correct. It's so next level, man. So I'm excited to hear about all that as well.
Sweet. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.
Later.